Welcome back to another episode. It's the morning after Nvidia earnings, and I had some time to think about things, so I just want to share some updates on my thoughts on Nvidia earnings. We also got huge amount of price targets. The stock is actually green, and some of my thoughts on the overall semiconductor market as well. So let's get started with today's episode.
I want to thank The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for the subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
So first, I actually want to start off with maybe the price targets. And these are price targets that all came out today after the company reported earnings. And it seems like everybody is increasing price targets. We can see it 195, 180, 190, 160, 135. The highest I saw here was actually 220 by Rosenblatt Securities. But we continue to see a nice bullish trend for Nvidia. There's obviously some that might not be as bullish as others. For example, Deutsche Bank increased their price target to 140 from 115. But we are starting to see kind of that healthy price increase after earnings. And if you were on my live stream yesterday, you do maybe you remember I mentioned that I believed in the morning we were going to hit with a nice amount of price targets, and that was going to cause a nice bullish sentiment of the overall stock. And it does seem like that's the case, as we're going to see the stock price right now is up roughly 1.8%, sitting near $148. Obviously, the market is going to be very volatile, and I don't know where it's going to be, but I do believe, at least for now, these price targets are creating at least some healthy short-term bullish trend for the stock. The reason I mentioned this, I personally could care less about analyst price targets, but I know there might be some watching that are curious more about the short-term price movements of the stocks. I think if you are a long-term investor, you really could care less about these price targets. I know I don't really care, right? Because at the end of the day, fundamentals ends up winning. Out of these, there was only one that I saw actually trimmed, and it was HSBC. They trimmed their price target to 195 from 200. So obviously they are still very bullish on the stock. They're just a little bit less bullish after earnings. So again, as long-term investors, it's not something that I personally would worry about. Now, I just want to share my overall thoughts. So obviously, earnings were yesterday, a lot to process. I did my earnings kind of deep dive yesterday and the live stream, but overall, I'm going to keep the same sentiment that I've had throughout the whole time. Earnings were great, and as a long-term investor, there was nothing that would cause any unease or worries that would force me to sell. For those that are not familiar, Nvidia is my number one position in my overall portfolio, with more than a quarter weight, right, of my overall portfolio, and a company that's sitting in the 6 digits value, right? So not counting decimal points. So it's a very important company in my portfolio. Luckily for me, I got in at a very early time. Now, during yesterday's live stream, I mentioned we would wake up to reiteration ratings and new price targets. And like we saw earlier, that's the current scenario. Now, I'm going to continue to say this in my videos, and I'm just to reiterate, I personally, because it's already my number one position and it's already such a heavy weight in my portfolio, I personally would not buy heavy at these levels. If I did, it would be very small dollar cost average. I also do believe the market gives opportunity to patient investors, especially in the semiconductor space. I mean, no one would have thought that we were going to get Nvidia at $100 in early August or in early September. And those were the times I did videos where I mentioned I was very bullish about the price during those times. I'm not saying we're going to get low levels anytime soon. But as an investor, I'm always looking, hey, my risk to reward ratio, where is it at right now? And to me, I follow the semiconductor space. I believe there's always opportunities. Because I'm not selling though, it does show that I am still long-term bullish on the stock. And I believe we are going to be much larger than we're at right now. But personally, I wouldn't put too much new money right now. I've been thinking about it of where I would really start to add. I'm not saying we're going to get there, but it would be somewhere between maybe the 115 to the 130s after looking at some numbers that I was running for future guidance expectations for the next few years. So somewhere between 115 to 130 is where maybe I would start a little bit more consideration on adding. Again, everybody has their own kind of thesis and buy points. So let me know in the comments below, what are your buy points? Are you buying right now? Now, some other things that I mentioned there is one of the biggest bullish sentiment from the earnings call was this part right here. They talked about their networking side, and many people don't really follow Nvidia for their networking side, but Nvidia Spectrum X, which is the Ethernet for AI, saw its revenue increase 3 times year over year. And their pipeline continues to build with multiple cloud service providers and consumer internet companies planning large cluster deployments that traditional Ethernet was not designed for. So for those that are not familiar, Spectrum X is the networking solution NVIDIA has made to help build super massive GPU clusters. The most recent and the biggest that we all know about in the public is xAI's colossal supercomputer with 100,000 GPUs, and that was made possible because of Spectrum X. Now, NVIDIA mentions that they're working with numerous cloud server providers and consumer internet companies planning large cluster deployments that traditional Ethernet was not designed for. So this is telling me right off the bat that almost every big player out there right now is planning to build a 100,000 plus GPU cluster within the next few months. We heard from Oracle. Oracle is building kind of that Zettascale of over 100,000 Blackwells, but Oracle is not the only one. I'm pretty sure we're going to hear this from the people from OpenAI. We're going to hear this from Meta Platforms. We're going to hear it from all the other big players as well. So for me, that tells me, and that gives me enough proof that we are still very early in this bullish sentiment for NVIDIA. And this is just proof we will continue to see 100,000 plus GPU clusters being built. Now, to me, even though the market for NVIDIA right now seems almost infinite, there is a cap. And the main reason there is a cap is because of the supply chain constraints. TSMC, because of advanced packaging, cannot build as many AI chips as NVIDIA needs. And for that reason, even though the market is up to the sky, or the sky is the limit, or whatever the saying is, you have to ground yourself a little bit, because while there is enough demand, no matter how much NVIDIA can go, supply is still an issue and will be an issue for the foreseeable future. So that, in my opinion, is something that's grounding investors and should rightfully do so. But long term, very, very bullish on NVIDIA. And I mentioned what was my most bullish point for the stock. And just so we understand a little bit of the supply chain issue, right? Supply can only be built up X amount each quarter, right? Because TSMC can only build capacity to certain levels. And also TSMC is very conservative, that they're not going to build super amount of things all at once. They kind of want to do it in like a timely manner to continue to see how the demand is for the overall market. I think TSMC is very knowledgeable about the semiconductor space, so they don't want to overinvest at once. But we can see here, these are the revenue numbers, the ones that I'm highlighting, the revenue numbers of the historical quarters. The ones in green, so starting from here, are just all my estimates. And we can see for the past few quarters, NVIDIA's revenue only grows between somewhere around $4 to $5 billion per quarter. Again, this is not because NVIDIA is seeing more demand, but it's because it's seeing more supply. So at least for the past 5 quarters, it seems like TSMC can really only add about $4 to $5 billion worth of revenue for NVIDIA. Obviously, there might be some quarters where TSM is able to add a lot more capacity, and those are going to be the quarters where NVIDIA really outperforms. But we can see historically, you can only expect revenue growth within a range because of TSMC's capacity issue. And maybe later on, I will share a little bit more of some of the other numbers I have out here. But overall, I hope you guys do enjoy this overall episode. Take care, have a good day, and see you next time.